You've seen her name everywhere. Whether you like it or not, you recognize the covers. And you know about the 1,000 TV and film projects her books are going to have. Colleen Hoover pops up everywhere and you don't know what to do. On every social network, in articles, on bestseller lists, on lists of books being adapted to film right now. She even shows up in your dreams, she listens to you sleep while she waits under your bed, she smells your towels after you dry off and leave them tossed on the floor because who the hell has the time to hang them up? In other words, there's no escape. So you ask yourself, who the hell is this author? Why is she so famous on TikTok? And if she's so famous on TikTok, does that automatically mean she's a terrible writer? How did a woman who was writing in her trailer house in Texas end up becoming synonymous with tears, recycled trauma, and lines outside bookstores across half of America, half of the world, while TikTok did its thing and the rest of the literally world watched with a mix of envy, horror, and a strong desire to copy the formula?
Colleen, I have the New York Times bestseller list from this week. Your books are highlighted. If you notice, you kind of dominate it. Do you ever feel bad for the other authors?
Well, I was relieved to see there were 5 on there this week because there have been like 6 and 7, and I'm like, okay. No, it's such an amazing feeling and a little confusing.
Today we're going to talk about Colleen Hoover, the freaking phenomenon of the moment that makes you question where the hell is literature heading. And how did she go from glory, from having like 6 books at the same time on the New York Times bestseller list, to putting her TikTok and other social media on private and saying she was on the verge of bankruptcy? What is one sad reality of the publishing industry? That is very hard to get any kind of success, to get noticed. Many of us believe that if we wrote beautifully, a talent scout would stumble upon us and hand us the publishing contract that would change our lives. We would buy a house in the same neighborhood as J.K. Rowling, and we would have the Beast library, the one from the Disney movie. But no, Hagrid is not gonna knock down your door, tell you that you're magical, and there is also a bank account in your name full of gold. Life does not work like that. You have to do it yourself, writing it, editing, layout, the illustrations, marketing, burning the freaking first manuscript and doing it again. Repeating that process for years without knowing if you will get any consolation at all. With that in mind, it is really incredible, it really is, the story Colleen Hoover lived through. Slammed. She started writing her first novel, Slam, in November 2011, inspired, she herself has said, by a line from the Avett brothers: "Decide what to be and go be it." And she finished it at the end of that same year while working long shifts as a social worker and juggling family life.
But we were very poor. We lived in a single wide trailer house. We didn't have a front doorknob. We had a washcloth where the doorknob went. Like, just very, very poor. And but very happy. Like, I'm still with my husband. I've been with him since I was 16, and we had 3 boys, and we lived a great life. We just struggled a little bit financially,
This is not "I wrote in some napkins" pose. In interviews, she says she wrote every spare moment she had, 11-hour work days, and still hands on the keyboard. Another local profile mentioned that this roughly 300-page manuscript came out in a little over a month. A month? I didn't even write my thesis that fast, and it was like 90 pages of pure and legitimate garbage. Now, here's the key detail. Hoover did not upload Slam to Amazon thinking about money or bestseller list. Unlike many other indie authors, she did not believe that the audience would come looking for her now that she had written a book. She thought nobody would read it. She uploaded to Kindle Direct Publishing simply so her family could read it easily. In her own words, it was a gift, and putting it on KDP saved her from printing and spending money. They had bought her grandmother a Kindle and she just wanted her grandmother to read her book. In a column from 2013, she tells it with total ease. She finished the book in December 2011, Googled how to share it without spending money, and landed on KDP by accident. In other interviews, she repeats that she did not intend to seriously publish. She just put it up so people she knew could read it. It was not a master plan. It was a family favorite that, like the Challenger, exploded to the surprise and panic of everyone.
So in 2012, you self-published Slammed, and you put it on Amazon released so your grandma could read it.
Yes.
Okay, talk about that.
So that was around Christmas time when I had finished writing it. And I wasn't even looking at it as like a book. You know, I was like, oh, I wrote this long story. I wanted everyone to read it. My sisters and mom and had read it. And so we'd bought my grandmother a Kindle for Christmas. It was right when Kindles came out. And I was researching on Google how to get a document onto a Kindle and came across Amazon's self-publishing platform. And I was like, oh, I could just load it up here, this Word document, and it will show up as a book on Amazon, and then she can download it. And so that's what I did. And the book ended up on Amazon with just an Amazon like basic cover, like they had templates you could use. And then my grandmother downloaded it. Well, then my sisters started telling everyone else, like, hey, my sister wrote this book. It's free right now. You can read it. And after 2 days of having a book on Amazon for free, they make you charge for it. And so then other people just still kept buying it. Like someone would read it and they would tell someone else to buy it. And 4 months later, it hit the New York Times as a self-published novel. And here we are.
And when that happened,
that was in May of 2012.
were you surprised?
Yes. Astonished. I thought it was a joke. I found out when I was at work that it was going to be on the New York Times the following week. And I hung up the phone and I'm like, that can't be right. That cannot be right. And I remember waiting. I didn't even tell anyone I worked with that day. And I went home and told my mom and my husband, and I'm like, I don't know if this is real. And so we actually waited until it came out on the New York Times before telling anyone because I was in such doubt.
The story is about Lycan, a young girl who moves with her family after her dad dies and ends up falling in love with Will, her neighbor. A nice guy who's also full of life's blows. Everything goes well until boom, they realize he is her teacher, and that is where the drama begins. Between poems, classes, and forbidden looks, the novel mixes grief, love, and slam poetry, which is what gives it its name. It is one of those romances that feel like they were written with teenage tears, pure feeling, zero cynicism, and even though it's not a masterpiece, it was the book that launched her from anonymity to stardom on Amazon. The one that turned her into the queen of the suffer but enjoy it kind of literature. And from there, the domino effect. Slam came out self-published in January 2012, and in February it already had a sequel, Point of Retreat. Because the pressure from readers and the emails demanding second part now came in a matter of days. At the beginning, downloads were 10 a day, 12, 14, until a very widely read romance blogger, Maurice, slapped a 5-star review on it at the end of March, and things blew up. Word of mouth, forums, reviews, and that blessed buzz of "this book made me ugly cry, read it now." By August, Slam and Point of Retreat were already on the New York Times list, and Atria, an imprint of Simon & Schuster, jumped in with a contract to republish them digitally immediately and in print in September. All of that happened in 8 months, from a homemade PDF to that little new releases table at the bookstore. The upward climb has very clear milestones. March 23, 2012, the key review. August 10, 2012, Atria's press release. Not bad for someone who literally uploaded the file so her grandma could read it. And what is Point of Retreat about? Basically, it continues the emotional mess of Lycan and Will, but already fully immersed in adult life, with all the complications that brings. Here, it is no longer just the, oh no, we can be together, but how you sustain a relationship when love has to compete with routine, grief, kids, and responsibilities. The story is told from Will's point of view, which many fans love because you finally get inside his head and see that he is also broken, not just her. People like it because he keeps that tender and heartbreaking tone that readers love about Hoover, but with more maturity. On top of that, the book continues to use slam poems as a bridge between the characters, which gives it a different, more emotional, more cathartic touch. Many readers feel it is more intimate than the first one. Fewer teacher-student cliches and more about real love with its fears, mistakes, and second chances. It is the kind of book that makes you sigh, cry a little, and think that, well, maybe it's worth to keep trying. Hopeless. What happened next is already postmodern pop culture history. Hopeless, self-published in December 2012, climbed to number 1 on the New York Times list, the first self-published novel to do so, and cemented the narrative of indie author who forces the door of the industry. She came in kicking and screaming whether the industry liked it or not because her readers demanded it. Hopeless follows the story of Sky, a seemingly normal girl but with a very tangled life. She has no internet, she does not go to school, she lives almost isolated until she meets Holder, a mysterious, intense guy who clearly carries something heavy from their very first encounter. What looks like just another teen romance slowly takes a dark turn. Sky's past is full of secrets she herself does not remember, and the relationship with Holder ends up exposing a story of abuse, trauma, and repressed memory. The tone of the book goes from infatuation to total shock, with revelations that explain everything that felt weird at the beginning. That mix of love and pain, of tenderness and tragedy is what hooks so many people. In terms of reception, Hopeless was a phenomenon. People like it because it had that Hoover stamp, an emotionally devastating but addictive story, quick to read, and dealing with heavy themes without strain from everyday language. On Goodreads, it has thousands of reviews that describe it as a romantic and brutal at the same time, although there are also those who criticize it for the same reasons. They say it uses trauma as a narrative device, that it simplifies delicate topics like sexual abuse, and that it sometimes feels emotionally manipulative. In literary media, some critics acknowledge its effectiveness as a young adult bestseller, but label it melodramatic and said its pacing felt more like a soap opera than a serious novel.
¿Qué haces? ¡Estás toda lisiada! Así es que era de este de quien estabas enamorada, maldita lisiada!
Even so, or maybe precisely because of that, it was a resounding success. It stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for weeks and consolidated the Coho brand. That mix of suffering, intense love, and guaranteed tears that has redefined everything she has written since. From that point on, Hoover operates in a hybrid mode, traditional plus indie. Understands like few others the timing of social media and becomes a magnet for readers looking for emotional catharsis in turbulent love stories, trauma, and redemption. In the BookTok era, the rocket turns into a permanent satellite. Million-selling sales, a fandom with its own name, the cohorts, and the consolidation of the Hoover tone, direct prose, chapters with hooks, and a very keen radar for hitting sensitive nerves without requiring a dictionary. All of this wrapped in the delicious contradiction that the phenomenon was born from an intimate act, uploading a book for her family, and ended up shaking the entire market. On top of her undeniably good luck, something that deserves to be celebrated is her passion for writing. She says that nothing was going to stop her desire to write. It did not matter if no one read her, it did not matter if no other human eye ever touched one of her lines. She would write anyway. And I think that is worthy of applause, especially nowadays when many indie authors believe the world owes it to them to read their books. No, my loves, no. I know that book cost you a lot. I know those pages contain half of your soul. I know that maybe that story has more heart than a cardiovascular physiology textbook. But that doesn't mean that anyone has to read it, much less like it. Many complain about how hard it is to get readers. Hoover did not write with readers in mind. She wrote simply out of love for doing it. She understood that the industry was a Goliath she could not defeat, and she did not even dare to challenge it. At the beginning, she was going to write anyway. Colleen did not come out of a golden cradle in the finest publishing house. She was one of those authors who open Amazon, upload a PDF and have a homemade cover, and end up going wild on the charts. With Slammed in 2012, she took a leap that is not normal. Would she have had so much success without the drama of BookTok? One video of someone crying with soft music, a highlighted quote, a bunch of "it destroyed me but I loved it," and boom, phenomenon. The industry loves telling itself the story that young readers came back thanks to Hoover. There is some truth in that. There is also algorithm, controversial stories, and that smell of personal story that feels like a confession. Because Hoover does not just sell romance, she sells catharsis package for sharing. For those nosy and the voyeurs who want to know every last detail of the neighbor's toxic, tacky relationship. Like when someone starts a Twitter thread saying something like, "I'm gonna tell you something I've never said before," and before you already realize that it has like 100 likes, something like that, but paperback. The Hoover formula is very clear. You take a relationship with wounds, you add good trauma, not textbook trauma, but the sticky kind you cannot shake off. You season it with supposed redemption, with that, I can heal this, I can break the cycle. And you serve it with simple, plain language and a few synonyms so you do not feel dumb. Well, there's no shame in that. She writes straight to the vein, to the stomach, to the person who is exhausted and wants to feel something intense without having to check a footnote. And it seems that is where it becomes addictive. Her books are playlists of pain and desire, with that vibe of, I know this is bad for me, but I cannot stop listening. It's like me when I hear that song, Is There a Heaven Up There, on repeat. Go on, listen to it. Listen and try not to cry. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. After the boom of Slam and its sequel, Hoover went into full-speed production mode. Barely 7 months after publishing Hopeless in July 2013, Losing Hope came out, which shows that Hoover was writing at a pace faster than a machine in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. Losing Hope. Losing Hope is Hopeless told from the other side, from inside Holder's head, the guy carrying the weight of everything that happened. There is no cheesy romance here, no easy smiles. The guy is wrecked, full of guilt, full of rage, trying to understand how something so messed up could happen to the person he loves. The book dives into his past, his relationship with his sister, and how everything he did or did not do haunts him. It is basically the same hell but from another trench. Hoover manages to make you understand the character, although sometimes it feels like being stuck in the mind of someone who has no idea how to forgive himself. And yeah, people like it because it completed the previous story and because many readers wanted to know what Holder was thinking in the key moments. But of course, the harsh criticism did not take long. Several readers and critics say this book was unnecessary, that it does not bring much beyond repeating the same events from another voice. Some call it a recycled version of Hopeless written just to sell more. Others say Hoover goes overboard with melodrama, that she forces the emotions and that the characters sound more like actors in a teen TV series than real people. In literary reviews, some mention that the book tries to give the protagonist psychological depth but ends up falling into grandiose phrases and self-help reflections. In short, Losing Hope was loved by fans who wanted more of the story, but for those who look for something with more substance, it feels like reading the same drama again, only sadder and longer. For better or worse, this is the kind of literature she truly wants to write. In interviews, she has confessed that when an idea settles in, she does not let go of it, and that she spends days shut in, silences her clocks, barricades herself with a Diet Pepsi at her side, her usual creative marathon. That period was key. She was consolidating a style, characters with wounds, secrets that explode, very toxic romance that hooks every noisy readers like a traffic accident, and the audience was already waiting for more. It was as if every semester Hoover released another book and the fandom answered, "Yes, give me more!" Then came Maybe Someday in March 2014, and a little later Ugly Love around August 2014. And there you see Hoover playing at another level. Maybe Someday she mixes real music, songs her characters write, a soundtrack that accompanies the novel, a bit of marketing innovation. And in Ugly Love she takes a risk with the no strings attached relationship, much more adult, more emotional quicksand, statements from the author like, "I wrote most of Miles' chapters first and then went back and added tastes," showed that she was experimenting with structure. During that period, the pressure of success was already there. More solid publishing contracts, higher sales expectations, and the audience was no longer just teenage readers but also young adults who wanted something more intense. Culturally, Hoover began to be a brand. Brands hurts, vibrates, seduces, but it also exposes. Every release was an event. Every book was the one that broke my heart, on the one that left me in pieces. It ends with us. This is a pivotal moment in Colleen Hoover's life, when she wrote her flagship book, It Ends With Us, published in August 2016. The author has said it was the hardest book she has ever written, because it was not just about imagining a complicated love story, but about digging into her own family history. Her mother lived through domestic violence, and Hoover knew it, saw it, felt it. So between papers, photos, and memories, she would rather show under the bed, she sat down and wrote it, knowing her mother would read it, knowing it was not pure entertainment. The nuance changes everything.
So my mother and father divorced when I was 2, and one of my earliest memories was him throwing a TV at her. Like, we grew up in an abusive household up to that point. My older sister saw more of it than I remember, but I don't know how she did it with 2 young girls. And, you know, as hard as it was back then, there were no resources for women to leave situations like that. But she was able to get out of that relationship. And then from then on, I just remember growing up with a mother who was so strong and independent. And
when it came out, her career already had a good tailwind behind it. But this book just propelled her into infinity. Reviews recognize it for dealing with domestic violence and emotional abuse within a romantic setting, which made many people see themselves reflected or uncomfortable in its pages. In conversation with the media, Hoover admitted she felt anxious, as if every new book were the last train, so she put everything into it. During the process of adapting it for film, which finally premiered in August 2014, she was involved in front of the camera, giving interviews, explaining her decisions, correcting mispronunciations in the script. All signs that she was no longer just a writer who self-published, but an author who changes lives and gives interviews to big outlets. That moment was both victory and exposure for Hoover. She gained global visibility, but it also intensified criticism, debates about what she was telling, how she was telling it, and what impact it had. When the novel jumped to the big screen, it lit the fuse of the drama that outdoes the story itself. The film version moved millions but also exposed missteps, hidden tensions, and structural criticism. Fans who felt disappointed because the image of abuse and healing being sold felt shallow to them. Awkward marketing, interviews where the lead seemed to be having fun and the gravity of the topic was overshadowed.
Behind this? Well, this is Britney's Versace dress, 2002, the butterfly dress, and this dress meant so much to me. Oh my God, my husband's getting soaking wet in the rain. It meant so much to me. I feel like you poured a lot into this movie, but then you turned around and you were just as supportive of Ryan. Yeah. What is it like to... And my hair care company, Blake Brown, my goodness gracious. It's been crazy. It's been a crazy week. I haven't slept in like a lot of time.
I'm going to jump into this, and Blake, I'm going to start with you. Most of us, if we're lucky enough to run into a celebrity in public, we only have a few moments to maybe speak with you guys. But for people who see this movie, who relate to the topics of this movie on a deeply personal level, they're really going to want to talk to you. This movie is going to affect people, and they're going to want to tell you about their life. So if someone understands the themes of this movie, comes across you in public, and they want to really talk to you, what's the best way for them to be able to talk to you about this? How would you recommend they go about it?
Like asking for like my address or my phone number or like my location share? Or I could just location share you and then we could...
On the one hand, the author was happy about the visibility, but on the other hand, the adaptation became a minefield. Accusations that the director and the lead actress were in professional conflict, merch sales that seem insensitive given the subject of the violence, and readers saying, "Hey dude, this was serious, what are you selling it to me like a light rom-com?" So what started as a novel that set out to expose a toxic cycle also became an uncomfortable mirror for the author, for the industry, for the public. And it might even be the last drop that overflowed the marital glass between Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. Not everybody liked what Colleen Hoover did. There are those who cling to the argument that this particular book by Colleen Hoover is extremely harmful for society, that what she does is not romance but a glorification of trauma dressed up as a love story, that what she sells is not healing but a stylish return of the same cycles of abuse she claims to want to break. There are articles, experts, readers, and very fed up readers who have tried to raise their voices against these kind of books that mix themes of violence with pastel color marketing. And among all those critical texts, there is one that stands out, an article worth mentioning, one that insists we should stop celebrating this novel. It Ends With Us is dangerous, it sends a twisted message, and we should stop applauding something that in practice can trivialize what so many people experience in their own flesh. The article says, don't get dazzled by talent, bestseller status, and hashtags. Because when we go back over It Ends With Us and its boom, the author built a story that seems to show the way out of an abusive relationship, yes, even with a pharmacy of feelings and second chances. But what domesticshelters.org points out is that path out is poorly laid out, or at least incomplete, and that can do more harm than we think. For example, the main lead, Ryle, is not just a guy with a temper who loses control. According to the article, he plans a sexual attack, humiliates the woman, Lily, in a chilling way, knocks her out and then repents as if it were an understandable mistake. And then the question gets uncomfortable. Where does the healing end and the normalization of abuse begin? And the ending of the book does not really clear that doubt, because in the end, Lily, the victim, decides to divorce. Fine, which sounds empowering. But she also decides to share custody of the daughter with the abusive stepfather, without supervision, which according to the article is contrary to the best interest of the child under some real-world legal frameworks. In other words, symbolically we read breaking the cycle, but in practice it looks like Lily leaves that door open, and well, that detail is key. The article argues that when you have a platform where mass readership turns you into a kind of emotional guide for millions of people, young readers looking for comfort, then your radius of influence matters. And if your narrative says, let's break this, but the ending says, well, but let's not go too far, then we have a mixed message. I mean, the article does not tell you to hate the book. It tells you to read it with critical eye, not to assume it is an automatic empowerment guide, to see what it leaves unsaid, what it normalizes, what it sells dressed in tears while maybe leaving change on hold. And you might even say, Yeah, but it's fiction. It's not a self-help book of domestic violence or a manual. Yes, but people do not consume those manuals. They don't read articles, studies, they don't let their lives be guided by statistics, by research, by investigations. No, they read this fiction and by huge amounts. Fiction is more important than what people think. We humans operate much more at the mercy of our emotions than of the logic of what the data say. A novel sticks more with people more than any article full of scientific citations. I mean, if you check it in Goodreads with its more than 4 stars, this novel will be like an unmissable classic you have to read. Those who love it really love it. For example, one reader say, "Holy wow, It Ends With Us is one of the most powerful books of 2016 and one of the most raw, honest, inspiring and profoundly beautiful stories I've ever read. It wasn't anything like what I expected, but it delivers so much more than I ever hoped for. This is the kind of book that I want to give to every woman and just be like, read this book now." Come to think of it, all the men should read it too. Everyone should read this book. Absolutely everyone. You see? You see how they are? This is what I mean with fiction. To people, these stories matter. To people, this thing really hits you inside. Look how she's saying it, like this is kind of a manual, that this is kind of a class you must take. It is a love story of unshakable love and finding the strength to make the right choice in the hardest situation. I honestly don't think I've ever been prouder of a heroine. I've loved Colleen Hoover's books for a long time because she always writes unique stories, and this one left a lasting mark on my heart. It is a must read. But of course, those who hate it with equal passion. What a great time to have a dissenting opinion about a book written by an author with a particularly rabid fan base, said no one ever. My glaring 1 star in a sea of 5s probably makes it pretty clear that I detested this book, but please refrain from fetching your torches and pitchforks for a moment and take note that not only did I just 5-star a co-host story 2 weeks ago, but also I want to make all of the sexuals with Miles Archer and will fight anyone for dibs on his imaginary love making. Didn't pick this up in order to hate on it. I'm one of you, sometimes. Okay, that got weird pretty quickly. Did not finish at 18%. Please have sex with me. I want you so bad, and I swear once you have sex with me, you'll never hear from me again. I promise. F this book. Why people continue to swoon over characters who treat them like dog shit is beyond my realm of thought. Especially since she's supposed to be someone who isn't the type of person who does one-night stands. Yet here we are again. A story about a guy who apparently has the magical penis to make you throw your convictions out of the window just because he's hot and wearing hospital scrubs. Absolutely not. And here we have all these one stars all after the other ones. Riley is definitely an Andrew Tate stan. If she has no haters, I am dead. The movie made me hate this book even more. What in the peanut butter fuck is this? Verity. When Colleen Hoover wrote Verity, she was already an established author. She had her steady audience, her loyal readers, and a whole publishing machine behind her. And with this book, she decided to try something new. We're talking late 2017, early 2018, when this lady decided to leave behind her usual turbulent romance and wade into the dark territory of psychological thrillers. And she did it her way. Shot it at home, writing fast, almost without telling anyone that she was doing something so different. In later interviews, she said she needed to clear her head from romance stories that she felt she was repeating herself. And that Verity was like a purge. She first published it independently in December 2018, and at first it did not even get the heavy promotion of her other books. But once again, word of mouth made it blow up. TikTok, Goodreads, reviews with titles like, "What did I just read?" or "I don't trust anyone after this book." People went nuts. The book tells the story of Lowen Ashley, a writer in crisis who agrees to finish an unfinished series by a famous author, Verity Crawford, who is incapacitated. But when Lowen arrives at the house to review the manuscripts, she finds a hidden text where Verity confesses horrific things about her family and the deaths of her children. It is twisted, uncomfortable, and Hoover does not give any clear answers. The ending is open in its own way. That ambiguity is what hooks people the most. Reviews split between those who call her a genius for stepping out of her mold and those who accuse her of having gone full-on morbid. On a personal level, she said that writing it affected her a lot, that she did not sleep well while finishing it, that she dreamed scenes from the book, that the story turned her stomach. But in career terms, it was a stroke of luck. Verity brought her a new audience, readers of suspense, true crime, and darker fiction. And of course, with that came invitations, interviews, podcasts, debates online about whether the love story author had gone too dark. Even her most faithful fandom split. Some celebrated the change, others begged her to go back to the romance that healed the soul. With Verity, Colleen showed everyone she could sell sweet books or twisted ones, that people would read them anyway, and that controversy once again was part of the business. It started with us. You see, this is the second part. The first one is called It Ends With Us, and this one is called It's Brilliant. In February 2022, it was announced that this book would be released in October of that same year, and the publisher said it was the title with the highest number of pre-orders in its history. Hoover wrote it under pressure. After her mega bestseller It Ends With Us became a cultural phenomenon, she herself said she wrote this sequel as a way to thank readers for asking so much for that open-ended storyline. The book picks up Lily Bloom and Atlas Corrigan's story right where the previous one left off, but shifts the focus. This time it is less about the initial trauma and more about rebuilding what comes next. Who you are when you decide you are not going to repeat what you lived through. Reviews were mixed. Some blogs called it a long-awaited emotional story that gives the closure so many people wanted. But others critics said it lacked the intensity of the original or that it felt softer, less risky. From a professional standpoint, Hoover was in full center of attention mode. Interviews, social media appearances, chats with specialized outlets. In her personal life, judging from what she shares on social media and in live interviews, it was an intense period, handling the pressure, tending to a massive fandom, coordinating campaigns, publishing while still writing other projects, all of that while carrying a very strong personal brand. The important gossip some readers noticed is that this book was practically built alongside the TikTok phenomenon, viral videos, debates on trauma and romance, and the idea that the author who used to write fast suddenly had to write with millions of readers in mind, which changes the creative pressure. Without a doubt, one more time, yet again, broadly speaking, per capita, this book, again, created a division among Hoover's fans. As we have said before, the most obsessed ones do not like hearing criticism of their idol, often demanding that her work not to be criticized at all. Which is pretty ridiculous and stupid, especially if you're on a platform that literally exists for that purpose. In Goodreads, for all to see, the book has less than 4 stars. And the first review that pops up on my Goodreads is already a 1 star. Welcome to Did This Book Really Need to Exist? Part 4,343,225. Alternative title, A Bland Man Does the Bare Minimum and People Worship Him Like He's an Austin Character. I swore I'd never read another Coho book, but It Ends With Us was the only one I could somewhat stomach, so I decided to read Start With Us to see how it was. Yikes. This review will be in bullet points. Minor spoilers will be included, but read it anyway as a warning not to read this book. Edit. For those of you in my comments going, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. We're allowed to critically consume literature. I'm allowed to write a glowing review of one book and a critical review of another. That's why this is a book review site. Of course, this review is like a negative, sarcastic critique of the novel. The reviewer considers the novel unnecessary and written solely to cash in on the commercial success of It Ends With Us. She points out that the story lacks depth, that the characters, especially Atlas and Lily, have no real chemistry or solid basis for their relationship, and that the plot twists feel forced. She also criticized the way Hoover tries to patch up mistakes from the previous book, the superficial romantic tone compared to the subject of domestic abuse, and the inclusion of modern elements like TikTok, which she finds ridiculous. It is hilarious how people get offended for a negative review of a book written by an author who makes a living of writing. That's the most normal thing that can happen in life. Below this particular negative review, there is a comment that says, "This was uncalled for and you didn't need to make this comment about the book. If you don't like it, that's completely fine, but don't try and push your opinion on other people." How the hell is she pushing her opinion on other people? It's a review, she's just giving it. That's completely normal. It's a website to share your opinion. That's what social media is for. What are you talking about? How can people go through life demanding that nothing negative be said about a book? If Don Quixote has 1-star reviews, your sequel, which you only wrote because your fan base demanded it, will have even more. Seriously, people get offended by the dumbest crap in this life. It is not a surprise that we're facing a social collective nervous breakdown with the stupidest stuff. It stresses us out. The comments are a fight between those who support her and those who hate her. It is as if they were discussing a life or death issue. Honestly, it's very entertaining. Hoover fans are intense in the best and worst sense. They love her with that kind of devotion people used to reserve for emo bands. They line up, they make edits, they do body reads and cry on camera. They also fight on Goodreads as if the fate of literature were decided there. That energy is fueled, but it is also a spark. When a critical post goes up, the defense appears. When a controversy breaks out, the sides appear. And then you have a battlefield where every damn comment feels like a personal attack. In those ecosystems, the author becomes more than just a person who writes. It starts to feel like this woman is already a flag, a refuge, and for some a punching bag. And that would exhaust anyone. Hoover is exhausted too, you can tell. But managing a fandom is like riding a big motorcycle on the highway. If you brake wrong, you will go flying after seagulls. If you accelerate without looking, you crash into the guy who wanted to change lanes. Maybe it's all these controversies and fighting that keeps Hoover so relevant. Because there are those who love her and those who do not stop criticizing her. When you write books that deal with such sensitive topics, how else can you squeeze them for profit? What kind of merchandise can you make out of toxic relationships and domestic conflicts? A Lego set of a bad boy who has one sexy face and another femicide face? An alarm clock that sounds like a police siren responding to yet another domestic call? Oh no. Hoover found the perfect product. A coloring book for a story about domestic violence, and that is no joke. So of course people were like, come on Hoover, no, keep your greed in check at least with these topics. They canceled the publication of the coloring book, sure, but the bad taste was already there. It is the classic moment when business devours the message and the brand forgets the subtext. It happens in movies, it happens in real life, it happens on TNT. Do you have that message too in English? It was like that in Spanish. And if you thought the drama was only on paper, no. What came out about Colleen Hoover's son is not just random gossip. In February of 2022, a Twitter user claimed that one of Hoover's sons, Levi Hoover, had sent her inappropriate messages when she was 16 and he was around 21, that he had requested photos, that it had been an online friendship that turned uncomfortable. Hoover responded months later, in November 2022, through a statement in a private Facebook group saying that her son had sent an inappropriate message, but that there was never a physical encounter, that she offered support, apologies, and that he had taken responsibility for the conversation. For many people, it was no big deal. After all, the age difference was not that huge, according to them. For others, Hoover's little boy already showed worrying tendencies, sending improper messages to underage girls. And obviously, the problem is that this episode mixes in with the whole other mess of her books: toxic relationship, romantic abuses, an endless debate about what exactly is being celebrated when millions read her stories. So when you find out that in her personal life there was at least one incident that raises questions, the public goes, wait, isn't this exactly what you're writing about? And on social media, forums, Reddit, reactions were sometimes strong. Blogs, scrub versions of old posts. Why didn't you act differently? Why is she still publishing like nothing happened? I mean, that matter is not closed for many people, and it remains part of why her name sparks as much love as irritation. In that freaking controversy where it ends without the movies, is that thing still going on? Turns out that while everyone was expecting the movie to be Colleen Hoover's big moment, what ended up happening was a huge legal mess between Blake Lively, the lead actor, and Justin Baldoni, the director and actor, leaving the entire fandom watching like when you see a street fight, scared but unable to look away. Blake came out saying that Baldoni treated her like crap on set, that there were improvised scenes, awkward moments, and a bad atmosphere manipulation, the whole thing. And the guy, without wasting time, responded with a lawsuit for hundreds of millions over defamation. In other words, a novel within a novel. And that is when Colleen Hoover steps in and takes sides. She went full Team Blake. She publicly supported her, wrote nice things about her, deleted photos of the director from her Instagram as if she were cleaning up evidence, and made it very clear whose side she was on. And well, the result, half of the fandom saying, "Good for you, Colleen," and the other half saying, "Girl, why are you sticking your hands in that fire?" Meanwhile, social networks exploded. TikTok, Reddit, Twitter, or X, whatever it's called. Everyone speculating, coming up with theories saying the movie should never have existed, that Hoover is tanking her own image, that she has become a gossip entrepreneur before being an author. And to top it off, Hoover came out saying she was broke as hell because she had to dump her merch on sale due to the scandal. Discounts, poor sales, people supposedly not buying from her anymore because of the drama. That sparked yet another wave. Some saying, "Oh, poor thing." And others mocking. How the hell can she be broke if she's TikTok's best-selling author? People no longer know if she's being honest or dramatic, or if she's using the crisis as a marketing strategy.
This may be either a new rock bottom for me or the best thing that's ever come out of my brain. Look at this. I poured Diet Pepsi into my ice cubes so that I will have the best Diet Pepsi I've ever had in my life. I'll let you know how it goes. So far, it looks pretty disgusting. I have hope. Do you think other people do this? You put water in our water. Do y'all put wine in your wine? I guess you don't drink wine with ice cubes, though. I'll do anything not to drink coffee. It tastes just like every other Diet Pepsi I've ever had. But I guess the kicker is, in 2 hours, when this ice starts to melt, will it be the best thing I've ever had? Probably. It's gonna be a great day.
Remember like 5 minutes ago when I ended the last video with "It's gonna be a great day"? Well, then I went into Cohorts, which is my Facebook group, and saw that my boss, Stephanie, put all of my merch on sale for $10 an item. That's like 5 times cheaper than what I paid for each item, which means by the end of the day today, I'm gonna be broke as shit. Thanks, Stephanie. You better be careful because maybe TMZ was right. Maybe I am firing all my employees and retiring. Well, I can't retire now because now I'm going to be in the hole by 5 p.m. Even if you hate me, you should go buy a piece because it's a very kind of bad thing. You know, at least I have my Diet Pepsi. It's still going to be a great day because you guys get almost free merch. Congrats.
The truth is that this whole mess divided again the community. There are readers who once adored her and now boycott her. Others say that they are tired of everything Hoover touches, book, merch, movie, ending in controversy, as if she were already a disaster magnet. And the most malicious ones say this proves Hoover went from writer to brand and from brand to circus. And so yes, this is not just a problem of the movie turned out weird. It is that everything from the cast to the author became a minefield. And people are side-eyeing Colleen Hoover because it seems that everything she does, wherever she goes, everything ends up messed up, literally. And it is not unusual at all to read comments from people insisting on boycotting the author's future projects, movies, whatever. Drama or not, she keeps selling. Whatever critics want or not, she still has her cohorts. Look, Colleen Hoover did not fall from the sky. And this is not just random luck, it is part of the moment we are living. She is a reflection, not the cause. As sociologist Zygmunt Bauman says, we live in a liquid modernity. Everything happens fast, feels fast, and is forgotten even faster. That anxiety about feeling something, anything, makes books like Hoover's work as express anesthesia. You do not need to think much, just connect and cry for a while. It is that simple. And that is the trick. This era rewards immediate emotion, no reflection. The algorithm does not ask you to analyze, it asks you to react. That is why Hoover's books fit perfectly into the scroll culture. They hook you, shake you, and leave you kind of empty but wanting more. As literary critic Lauren Levine says, we have turned women's pain into content, into something that can be sold, consumed, and recycled. And that is exactly right. The market struck gold by packaging women's suffering as emotional entertainment. That is why her stories go viral, because people see themselves in them. Not necessarily because they are good, but because they hurt right where we are wounded. That said, those who love her insist that she has real craft. One thing that confuses those who do not read her is thinking her success is just luck or just tears. There is skill, it is just not the kind of skill traditional critics like to applaud. Hoover handles pacing well, they say. Chapter endings with mini cliffhangers, transitions that do not make you dizzy, flashbacks used in measured doses, characters who feed in a tweet because they know how to say in 10 words what others say in 2 pages. Her metaphors are not aiming for a Pulitzer, they are aiming straight for your chest. Sometimes she falls into cheesy, sometimes she sounds like a mock quote. Sometimes, yes, she repeats stock phrases like there is no editor in sight. But the muscle of continuity and cliffhanger is well toned. Look, she's not making high cuisine, she's making comfort food with a spicy kick. And people, tired at the end of the day, ask for that. We should not be afraid to admit it. But can we say Colleen Hoover is a bad writer, a good one, misunderstood, overrated, underrated? What the hell is she? One of the most repeated criticisms of Colleen Hoover is that her novel turned abuse, manipulation, and toxic relationships into a kind of sugar-coated romance that ends up being irresponsible. As an article in Book Riot points out, the author's romance stories feature abusive, harmful relationships that feel cringy at best, and glamorize abuse and harmful relationships at worst. Another piece from Glamour sums up the problem like this. Critics say several of her novels, It Ends With Us in particular, deliver an anti-feminist message, rely on misogynistic tropes, and even go so far as to romanticize domestic violence. And these accusations do not only come from haters, but from readers who feel the message is dangerous, that what is sold as love story actually normalizes violent behavior. On reader forums you can find comments like this one on Goodreads. Her books romanticize abusive relationships. It's being advertised to young and impressionable women. And that is the dark side of the phenomenon, when something that could be used to make abuse visible ends up reinforcing the very thing it supposedly wants to denounce. On the other hand, people also question the literal quality of her work, not only the content but the style. She is accused of writing repetitive plots with basic prose and female characters lacking real depth and autonomy. In the outlet Northern Iowan, the following was published. Beyond the fact that her books depict an abusive fantasy, her response to those criticisms have not been kind. And in review in The Observer, you can read an even more direct critique. Her prose is rather basic, lacking any compelling voice for her already lackluster plots. So the controversy is not just moral, it is also aesthetic. Several literary critics ask what kind of reading we are rewarding when the winning formula seems to be serious topic, plus flat language, plus guaranteed tears. That is why many in the industry see her as a symptom of the current market. Immediate success, virality, but little substance. But of course there are books out there about domestic dysfunction that are worth reading. One novel that I particularly like is The Woman Who Walked Into Doors by Roddy Doyle. And look, I'm not out there looking actively for like these kind of stories with domestic abuse or women empowerment in general. And that should tell you a lot because I love the book. I thought it was very well done. It uses literary devices in a very intelligent way. I connected really much with the character, despite the fact I have pretty much nothing in common with her. I'm not a woman, I have not lived through domestic abuse, yet I understood, I was in her side, I was thinking everything. There was nothing romanticized about the subject. It didn't feel like a soap opera, it felt like raw, real life. And it plays with the timeline, it does a lot of things that I found pretty cool. And despite the fact that it's written by a dude, nobody was, being or saying, this dude shouldn't be talking about this because he's not a woman, and he's talking from a woman's perspective. The book was very celebrated by critics and readers alike, so it has a lot of weight, I would say, and it's a book I would like to recommend at least. But well, what has happened with our friend Colleen Hoover after all these messes and stuff? Because she has actually not published anything since 2022 when she wrote her novel, It Starts With Us. It turns out that after publishing It Starts With Us in October of 2022, the pressure on Hoover became almost astronomical. In an interview with People, she said that being aware of her massive audience, millions of readers, social media, film adaptations, was changing her creative rhythm. On top of that, her focus has been shifting toward film and TV projects, adaptations of her books, and building her personal brand, which eats up time she used to devote primarily to writing. It also looks like she has several new books announced for the future, a kind of creative pause, not a total abandonment. For example, there is a mention of a new suspense or thriller novel with an estimated release date further down the road. I have two questions for you. Which book of her would you actually recommend? Or if you like her, what would be, or how would you defend Colleen Hoover? What do you think is gonna happen to her? What do you expect from her? And if you hate her, tell me exactly why. What sentence, what book, what was the point where you decided she was not for you? I mean, I haven't read much from her. It's not my kind of literature, but I do not judge if you like her. God knows I'm not a reader of just pure classic masterpieces. I like my good kind of sometimes craft of or comfort reads. So just let me know about your opinion on the topic. Thank you for watching, and until the next video.